Hey everyone, this is William Moore, and you're watching Beyond the Ties That Bind. Thanks for joining me. I pray that everybody is having as good of a day as you can possibly have living under the tyranny we now find ourselves under. When I started the channel Beyond the Ties That Bind, I wanted it to be geared towards teaching history, the history of America, and show that freedom and government cannot coexist, no matter what the size of government. Many people look back to the founding of the government, the Constitution, and they look at that as a form of limited or small government. However, it does not matter the size or scope of the government. Government and freedom cannot coexist. Now, George Washington wrote a letter to the state ratifying conventions in which he stated concerning the Constitution that people entering into society were going to have to sacrifice certain rights for the good of all. That doesn't sound like a freedom document to me, nor does it sound like a document which protects the freedoms of the individual and restrains the power of the government. Actually, it's the opposite. It protects the power of the government and restrains the freedom of the individual. Government and freedom cannot coexist, and that's what everyone is finding out right now. So I wanted to use Beyond the Ties That Bind to teach history from a perspective that you're not going to find in the government indoctrination centers known as public schools or in the religious indoctrination centers known as Christian churches. I wanted to teach the truth. When people think about the Constitution, they're not thinking about the articles, sections, and clauses. They're thinking about the amendments. Most people have never read the articles, sections, and clauses. The articles, sections, and clauses helped to create a strong central government with unlimited power of taxation. Most people are thinking about the amendments, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and so on, the Bill of Rights. However, the Bill of Rights did not come into existence until almost 2 years after the Constitution was crafted by George Clymer back in Philadelphia. See, what happened, a coup took place, just like the coup that is taking place presently, although the coup taking place presently is a much larger coup. A coup took place in that they replaced the Articles of Confederation, which left power in the hands of the states. They replaced that and created a strong central government. So then the Bill of Rights came along, and that was a compromise with men such as the great Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson to an extent, George Mason. So it was a compromise. And this compromise we now call the Bill of Rights, but it's not really the Constitution. See, the Bill of Rights and the amendments contained within are only as strong as the governing body which oversees that document. Now, in this case, it goes back to judicial review. And it can go to the Supreme Court to where a majority of 5 out of 9 judges decide what's good for the rest of the 327 million people living within that specific territory known as the United States of America. The Constitution does not guarantee freedom of the individual. It restrains the individual. It guarantees power for the central government. If you read the articles, sections, and clauses, they have nothing to do with freedom. And this country was not founded upon getting out from under the yoke of the king or the crown. At the time, we had the West India Trading Company. And the West India Trading Company had a monopoly upon importing and exporting. This actually was not beneficial to the prosperity of men like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, Samuel Adams. The list goes on and on. So, what they were doing, they were rebelling against the monopoly of the West India Trading Company. They were not rebelling against the crown per se. They were not rebelling against taxation because after they won the war for independence, they enacted higher taxes than the crown enacted, which led to Shays' Rebellion. Then Shays' Rebellion scared the powers that be and made some people realize that in order to control this rebellion and in order to be able to enforce this burdensome taxation, that they were going to have a central government. So they met in Philadelphia, there was a coup, and then we had the Constitution. And most people have never read the article, sections, and clauses. They only know the Bill of Rights, which was a compromise with men such as Patrick Henry, George Mason, Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson to an extent. So the Constitution is not a freedom document. It does not guarantee freedom for the individual. It created a strong central government. Now, there had to be a compromise because Patrick Henry was so smart that he could have blown the entire Constitution out of the water. He could have stopped the entire process. Now, Samuel Adams could have done so as well single-handedly because he threatened the life of the men who were crafting the Constitution. And trust me, he meant it. So you had, at the time that the Constitution was going out from Philadelphia to the state ratifying conventions, George Washington wrote a letter. In that letter, he said people entering into society must sacrifice some of their individual liberties for the security of all. This is actually in a letter which was attached to the Constitution that went out to the state ratifying conventions and is just as much a part of the Constitution as the Bill of Rights. And what does that document, that letter state? It states that people were going to have to sacrifice certain liberties, certain freedoms for the good of everyone else in society. Doesn't sound like a freedom document to me. However, today people believe that this document is that it's a magical piece of paper. Well, it is magical to an extent because anytime you need it, it pulls a disappearing act. It's a piece of caca. It is not worth the paper it is written upon. Actually, toilet paper has more value, especially nowadays. So you have people claiming that people like James Madison, who the Constitution, the writing of the Constitution is attributed to, but that is not correct at all. Now, he helped in the Bill of Rights as far as the amendment process and writing the amendments. He was a part of that. He helped write the Second Amendment. Now, the Second Amendment is not carte blanche. You can own anything you want, carry it wherever you want, and government cannot restrict your rights. No, because James Madison, he wrote laws and proposed laws that limited people's use of weaponry. They had to stay upon their own property with their weapons. They could not go outside of the boundaries of their property with their weapons. And later on, in a court case involving the state of Philadelphia, it was James Madison who helped write the Second Amendment, who declared that the states did not have rights to defend themselves against the federal government, and that the Second Amendment did not give the state any rights or the individual any rights to take arms against the federal government. The Second Amendment was created to protect the federal government. Now, you can argue that all you want, and it just means that you don't know your history. And it just means that you haven't done your research. And if you do the research and then you deny what you find, that just means you're an idiot. Now, we find ourselves today, like I stated, I wanted this channel to go in a different direction. I wanted to teach history. But now, each and every day, we have so much going on that one day's events could fill chapters in the history book of the world. We have so much going on right now. An economic collapse, all under the guise of a virus which Dr. Anthony Fauci states is not as dangerous as seasonal influenza, or maybe is as dangerous as seasonal influenza. He wrote this in the New England Journal of Medicine, but he stands in front of the cameras and says, oh, 2 million people can die. But in the New England Journal of Medicine, he says it's going to be more akin to a severe seasonal influenza, which has a death rate of 0.1%. Now, that's bad, 0.1%. You don't want anyone to die. But the people who are dying, and Italy shows this, the people who died in Italy, they all had pre-existing conditions. They had heart disease, they had asthma, they had respiratory problems, they had diabetes. They had pre-existing conditions which weakened their immune system and allowed the virus to come in, and either the virus aided their pre-existing condition in bringing about their demise, or their immune system was so weak that it couldn't fight against the virus. In any case, they had a pre-existing condition. Healthy people, the virus does not affect. You have the virus being identified within healthy people. However, the healthy person's immune system has already defeated the virus. So you have people, you can call it false positives. You have people taking the test, which the virus shows up in their body. Their immune system has already defeated this virus, and the virus is not mutating in them. So these tests cannot determine whether or not the person is healthy, the person is sick, or the person may become sick. It just shows that the virus is there. It doesn't show any type of mutation. It doesn't show any type of multiplication of the virus cell. So we are losing our freedoms day by day by day under the pretext of this virus, which is no more dangerous than a severe seasonal influenza. This is from the man who stands next to the Orange Man and tells everyone that millions could die if these measures, these safety measures, are not enacted, such as social distancing, 6 feet away. Now they want you to practice social distancing in your own home. I'm not going to comply with any of their measures. Why? Because this spirit lives within me. And it is the spirit that says to the federal government, You can stuff your Constitution, your laws, and your mandates where the sun don't shine. We have people who are turning other people in who are not complying with these mandates from the federal government and state government, these stay-at-home orders. People who are trying to make a living for their family, and they're being turned in by other Americans. I didn't think I would ever see a day like that in America. Here we are, though. Did your Constitution, you Constitution lovers, do anything to prevent this? No. Because, as Lysander Spooner so eloquently stated, but whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. So true. This country, first of all, your Constitution did not stop what took place in 1913. And the institution which was created in 1913, the Federal Reserve, which is a central bank owned by about 7 to 10 families. Those 7 to 10 families are responsible today for what is going on in America. Did your Constitution stop that? No. The Constitution is powerless. It's a dead document. First of all, we have what purports or professes or is claimed to be a contract, the Constitution, made 80 years ago. Now, this is being stated by Lysander Spooner. Made 80 years ago by men who are now all dead, and they're still dead today, and who never had any power to bind us, but which, it is claimed, has nevertheless bound 3 generations of men consisting of many millions, and which, it is claimed, will be binding upon all the millions that are to come, but which nobody ever signed, sealed, delivered, witnessed, or acknowledged, and which few persons, compared with the whole number that are claimed to be bound by it, have ever read, or ever seen, or ever will read or see. Very few people have even read the document, and most people who say they've read the document only read the Bill of Rights. We have a coup going on right now, and a lot of people still support Donald Trump, and they give Trump the credit for the economy. And when they're talking about the economy, they're talking about the stock market, and the stock market is not a barometer of the economy. The stock market is inflation. The stock market is the Fed purchasing securities each and every day. So if you're stating that the economy was growing under Donald Trump, you don't know the economy, so keep your mouth shut about the economy, because you don't know what you're talking about. First of all, the Federal Reserve was buying securities at about $50 billion a day before they started this last round of quantitative easing, which is now Q infinity, or quantitative easing infinity, what I call Q infinity and beyond. So now they're purchasing $125 billion in securities each and every day. So they are inflating the stock market. That's all we've had for the last 12 years, since the last meltdown, is an inflation of the stock market, not a barometer of the economy. We had importing and exporting issues. We had tariff issues thanks to Donald J. Trump, which was causing the price of goods to go up. Inflation is taxation without legislation. And we have had inflation within the economy. We have not had strong employment numbers. They have been soft. Manufacturing in this nation has been soft. Now we have all this socialistic, fascistic, what I like to call fascism type of legislation going on, to where there's going to be bailouts, there's going to be companies nationalized, there's going to be helicopter money just handed out to everybody. The federal government's going to pay for everything. You're going to get extra money with unemployment insurance. Everybody's going to get this $1,200 check. And people don't realize that the man that they're crediting for this economic boom in the last 3 years, which hasn't even given us GDP, gross domestic product, of over 3%. He hasn't even eclipsed Obama's numbers, but yet you're telling me that he is responsible for some economic boom in the last 3 years? Caca. Anyway, that's my new word. Anyway, so now this man that everybody is giving credit for an economic boom is doing things that is going to bring about hyperinflation, that is going to destroy the dollar, and he's a puppet of the bankers, which came into existence. Actually, they were in existence long before that, but they made it official in 1913, because America has been operating, except for about 3 years, under a central bank of some type or other. The only 3 years in the history of America that it was not under a central bank and not in debt was under Andrew Jackson. I've got problems with Andrew Jackson as far as how he treated the indigenous tribes, but he did kill the bank. And from 1835 to 1838, while there was no bank, America was not in debt. But in 1913, they organized a little bit better. We have the Federal Reserve. And these are the same people that are controlling Donald J. Trump now. These are the same people who came into power that your precious Constitution could not stop. These are the same type of people committing war crimes over and over and over again that your Constitution cannot bring to justice. I don't know if the final nail in the coffin was the Federal Reserve, was the assassination of Warren G. Harding, or was the assassination of JFK, or the assassination of 3,000 people on 9/11. Don't know when the last nail in the coffin was, but America's being buried now. America is going down, going under. There is no hope for this thing unless the 10% of people who are not complying with government orders and love freedom more than they love licking the boots of government will rise up and do something about it and say enough is enough. When I was a child, I used to watch Batman. And I used to think, wow, man, wouldn't it be cool if there really was a Batman, or if I was Batman? But today I realize that Batman would comply with stay-at-home orders. He would even help enforce them. So what we need today, we need the Joker. We need people who will not comply with federal tyranny and this despotic government led by this baboon of an orange man who is more worried about his ratings on television. He doesn't care that people are losing their jobs and that people are going to lose their homes, their vehicles, not be able to feed their families, or as George W. Bush used to say, not be able to put food on your family. But anyway, this man's more worried. He's number one on Facebook. He's number one on Twitter. He's so happy about that. Well, people are being destroyed. Domestic violence or domestic abuse calls are going up. Suicides are already going up. People are losing things. People have lost hope. And this man, this narcissist, this egomaniac, is only worried about his ratings and Facebook. And people still support him. You people who support this guy, you're as dumb as the guy. Okay? That's all there is to it. This guy was propped up by the Rothschilds, bailed out by Wilbur Ross, had so many bankruptcies. He has no moral compass. If you look at Trump Tower, there's all types of Freemasonry artifacts there and symbolism within Trump Tower. He's not a believer. If he was a true believer, Kenneth Copeland and Paula White surely wouldn't be his pastors. I mean, you talk about put those three in a room together and they would kill each other because they're all such egomaniacs. They couldn't wait for their opportunity to suck the air out of the room to talk about themselves. Excuse me. Anyway, this, I was hoping, like I said, to show through history how government and freedom cannot coexist, but now government's doing the job for me. At least to those people who can think critically or not part of the cult of personality, that cult of personality, whether it's Trump, Biden, Sanders, Hillary. We're going to war, whether it be with China or Iran. We're going to go to war. We're going to see hyperinflation. We're going to have a presidential election, which I still believe that Hillary will run against Trump and beat Trump. And this was all set up. Trump was part of the plan. It was all rigged to give him the election, to bring about this type of collapse, because, as Vladimir Lenin said, in order to control the opposition, you must lead it. And that's what they're doing. People who would normally be opposed to this type of fascism or socialism or fascism, as I call it, now have become Fednecks. They love the federal government. They used to be part of the Tea Party. They used to protest government spending, taxation, bailouts, but now, because it's their guy doing it, it's okay. So the Republicans, the opposition, has been neutralized, neutered. If you want to know if a person's Republican or not, for sure, physically, all you have to do is lift up their skirt. There won't be any testicles there because they've been neutered. They've been neutered by the bank who used Donald J. Trump to neuter them. And until people break away from this mindless support of Donald Trump, this country's lost. Until conservatives wake up again, this country's lost. So you have basically government, which is a band of robbers. Any band of robbers only have to declare themselves a government, and all their robberies and all their crimes are legalized. So we have the government now, that this band of robbers taking away people's dreams, their hopes. But I'm still going to try and accomplish the things that I've wanted to accomplish. I'm still going to attempt to do the things that I wanted to do. And I know there's people out there that will still try, they will still attempt to do the things that they've wanted to do in their lives, even though we are now living under a despotic government. And if you Trump supporters can't see that you're living under a despotic government, I don't know what to tell you. The government's going to create hyperinflation. The government's going to take everything you have, and then they're going to say that they're going to redistribute it evenly, help you out. But what they're doing is they're taking from you and giving to these large corporations. The Federal Reserve, through the guise of government's going to purchase these corporations, have a stake in these corporations, and they're going to own it all. Buyer and lender of last resort, just like Gregory Mannarino stated. That no government, so-called, can reasonably be trusted or reasonably be supposed to have honest purposes in view any longer than it depends wholly upon voluntary support. So, no government, so called, can reasonably be trusted or reasonably be supposed to have honest purposes in view any longer than it depends wholly upon voluntary support. And I want to read this by Lysander Spooner. This is the one that I wanted to read before I read that one. If any man's money can be taken by a so-called government without his own personal consent, all of his other rights are taken with it. For with his money the government can and will hire soldiers to stand over him, compel him to submit to its arbitrary will, and kill him if he resists. And that's what we're living under today. And your Constitution was not able to stop it. It's not up to the government to defend your rights, and it's not a piece of paper, a little piece of paper is not going to defend your rights. Only you can prevent government from taking your rights or prevent others from taking your rights. I'm running long here. Some other things that I wanted to say. But right now we have a lot of people, a lot of governors, the president, Fauci. You see them all standing up at the podium together. They're not practicing social distancing. They're laughing at you practicing social distancing because they know that you don't have to practice social distancing. They know this coronavirus is nothing. But anyway, it's necessary. The social distancing, the shutdown, the planned shutdown of the economy, like James Bullard of the St. Louis Federal Reserve stated, planned shutdown. Pompeo said that we were in a live exercise. Fauci said just 3 years ago that the president was going to have a outbreak take place during his term as president, and now all these things are necessary, even though it was planned. Well, necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Everyone who loves freedom, do not comply, and do not put up with other people who expect you to comply. So anyway, this is William Moore for Beyond the Ties That Bind. And this flag does not represent slavery. This flag flies in almost every conflict worldwide where a people are fighting against a tyrannical and despotic government. This flag was not the flag of the Confederacy. It was the flag of those who fought against federal tyranny of the United States government. Everyone, stand up for your freedoms, protect your freedoms, because you're the only one who's going to be able to protect your freedoms. Don't rely on others. This is William Moore with Beyond the Ties That Bind. Until next time, live in peace as much as it is possible to live in peace.